All right, let's take you back to London now, where Julian Assange is, as we go to where, holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy in the British capital. He is seeking asylum in that country as he awaits extradition to Sweden. As Karina mentioned just last week, the UK Supreme Court said it would not be reopening the case, which resulted in that very court ruling that Mr Assange should be extradited to Sweden to face those sexual assault charges. We have a statement we can bring you now up on screen from the embassy of the Ecuadorians in London. It reads that as a signatory to the United Nations Declaration for Human Rights, we have an obligation to review all applications for asylum, and while the department assesses Mr Assange's application, he'll remain at the embassy under the protection of the Ecuadorian government. The statement goes on to say the decision to consider this application for asylum should in no way be interpreted as the government of Ecuador trying to interfere in the judicial process of either the United Kingdom or Sweden.
And if we just go through the history of Julian Assange facing these allegations of sexual assault in Sweden, last week, as you mentioned, Michael, the court in Britain said it would not reopen that case. That came after the decision in May that allowed his extradition to Sweden as being lawful. Of course, Julian Assange's legal team and what he's been saying all along since these allegations first came to light was that any extradition to Sweden would then allow him to be extradited to the United States, where he may face espionage charges.
But front and centre now is Ecuador, and there's no surprise why Julian Assange has chosen this country. It has long had a hostile relationship with the United States. It was very angered by those Wikileaks documents that showed the activities of US intelligence agents in that country some years ago. We can also bring in now a statement from the Deputy Foreign Minister of Ecuador, Quinito Lucas, who says that the government there is open to giving Julian Assange residence in Ecuador without any kind of trouble, without any kind of conditions. Mr Lucas goes on to say, we think it would be important not only to converse with him but to listen to him. He goes on to say that Ecuador wanted to invite Assange to, in his words, freely expound and see what it's like in friendly countries.
Wikileaks says it has 1,621 cables that originated in the US Embassy in Quito, the Ecuadorian capital, but their contents have not yet been disclosed. The AP story goes on to say that Ecuador expelled 2 US diplomats in early 2009, accusing one of directing CIA operations in Ecuador and another of interfering in police affairs.
Our correspondent Lisa Miller joins us on the phone now from outside the Ecuadorian Embassy in London. Lisa, good morning to you. What is the latest there?
Well, there's quite a crowd gathering outside, Michael. I've tried the buzzer for the embassy. There's no response. You can hear it ringing inside. This is a very upmarket suburb, Knightsbridge in London, and it's a block from Harrods. So there's quite a crowd of people gathering as well, wondering why all the media have turned up. But there is no sign of any life inside, even though we know Julian Assange is in there. That has been absolutely confirmed.
It's a pretty high-stakes move for the Wikileaks founder, isn't it, as he awaits that extradition order to be executed for him to go to Sweden?
Well, you'd have to think that he has had some legal advice to suggest that what was going to be his next bid, which was to apply to the European Court of Human Rights once the British Supreme Court had completely ruled on his appeal, you'd have to think that perhaps he's been told that wasn't going to be a fruitful approach, that there was no legal path that was going to lead him to any success, given that he is now holed up inside the Ecuadorian embassy. This would have to be regarded as a pretty desperate last-ditch bid, even though, as you were just saying on the program, that there has been a bit of history there with Ecuador and words and things that it's put out previously in regards to the US.
Right, so it's just a bit of a waiting game, Lisa, for you and the phalanx of media outside. Julian Assange is obviously in there. If the Ecuadorian government grants him asylum, he'll obviously have to at some stage leave that building to be spirited to Ecuador.
Well, yes, and I mean, there's absolutely no idea of how long this might take, but everyone seems to be settling in, thinking it might be lengthy. The words that came out in the statement from Julian Assange, what we heard from the Foreign Minister, Ricardo Coutinho, the Ecuadorian Foreign Minister, they're pretty strong words, this suggestion that he's that Julian Assange has had to do it because he was being persecuted and that his own country, Australia, wasn't going to protect him from being extradited to a country that applied the death penalty for a crime of espionage. So it is a very complicated jigsaw that's going on here, Michael, because, of course, while there is this extradition case to Sweden that's going on over these allegations of sexual assault, this bid, seeking asylum from Ecuador, seems to be referring more to the point that Julian Assange believes the US has already secretly indicted him for the Wikileaks documents drops of 2010, and that's where this particular asylum bid is being driven from.
Lisa Miller, settle in. We'll go back to you a bit later in the program. Thank you.
Thank you.